Cause we ain't giving up no mountain, we ain't giving up. We ain't giving up no tree. We ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice bread, not one crush, not a bit of grass. We love the open country of the Rupununi and the Essequibo, daytime or night. Though we may criticize it, this is our home, we love it, and we need to keep it. We have that right. So we ain't giving up no mountain, we ain't giving up. We ain't giving up no dream.
Welcome to Facing the Nation for May 19th, 2023. And of course, it's a privilege to be in your homes again today. You know, call up a neighbor, call up a friend, and tell them that Facing the Nation is on. You know, you can follow us on our Facebook pages as well, the People's National Congress Reform page on Facebook. You can join us on the APNU AFC page on Facebook as well. And of course, a little later on, you will catch us on our YouTube channel, the People's National Congress Reform page. So come on, call a friend up, tell them log in, channel 6, and our social media platforms. Facing the Nation is on. Today, my guest that I would love to introduce now is no stranger to the TV, he's no stranger to politics, but today I believe it's the first time I'll be interviewing him on Facing the Nation. My guest today is none other than Mr. Sharma Soloman. As you would know, he's the former regional chairman of Region Number 9, a political activist, Region 10, and a political activist doing lots of work, not just in his community, but around the country as well. Welcome to Facing the Nation.
Hi, thank you for having me on your program. It's a pleasure to be here and to be in your company, but more so to be given this opportunity to speak with your audience. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. And of course, it's a privilege to have you as well. I know a lot is happening right now, and I know you're ready to talk about all those things. But there is something I usually do, especially the fact that you're here for the first time on Facing the Nation. I love to give my audience an opportunity to know a little about, our political activists. People see you doing all the things that you do, but, sometimes we want them to know a little about the softer side of you before we get into what we need to. I mean, I think the whole of Guyana knows that you're from Linden. And I still want to ask you which part of Linden you're from, and what was it like growing up in that part of Linden?
I am from several parts of Linden.
Okay.
My family, they're originally from the East Coast. And they're
Okay.
the first, you can call, settlers who came out to look for that bauxite prosperity in the 70s. So I have the Solomons from the Golden Grove area and the Victoria area, and I have the Eliases from the Nabakalis area. But my parents, like my grandparents, we came to Linden in search of that good, prosperous life. And in this community, growing up as a youngster, it is an era where you grew up in trade unionism movement, in the fashioning of Linden in the 70s. So we were very exposed to a lot of political activism, whether those were through the trade union movement or political parties. And I think many of that, or a lot of that, in my earlier days at Document Circle, you saw the Five Corner. Many of the workers, every march, protest passed at that area. I grew up in the Market Square, the Coffee Square, where all those social events would eventually culminate. And, it was a good opportunity to ground properly in this community and to see, especially where the working man and women had to struggle to get many of their rights respected, not only in the workplace, but even in society as a whole, to ensure politicians and people who are setting policies understood their struggle. So I grew up ripe into that early 70s, early 80s, in fact, late 70s, early 80s environment. I'm a father of two young, beautiful girls, Amelia Joy and Alea Grace. I'm married 8 years now. And you and I, Shanika, we finished up our international relations
Yeah,
degree a couple of years ago. So
correct.
yes, I took the time to get some theoretical perspective of this politics and
Politics.
activism that we do. You know, many times I saw it from a practical standpoint while being chairman. But I think now having this theoretical side, you see many of the application, even as you now challenge this People's Progressive Party and you see the new change in dynamics of oil and politics and how to respond to those things effectively.
Well, I'm happily noting that your roots are on the East Coast, like myself. So that's something I don't think anybody knew. All I ever thought of when I thought of Sharma Soloman was Linden, nothing else. Right? So I'm happy to know that. And, you're giving us basically how you got yourself involved into this politics. You were pretty much breathed into it
Yes.
by your environment. And that's good. That's very, very good. Um, we we have a lot of things that are happening currently in Linden. And of course, being the person that you are, I will not allow you just to speak about Linden because I know you can touch many issues even outside of Linden. But I want to give you that opportunity for us to start off with some of the stuff that has been happening in Linden over the last, especially the last couple of weeks. Been seeing lots of activity in the Linden area. And, a lot of persons were inquiring and still want to have an idea of the issue that led you to the station. I think it was a week or two ago.
Oh well, this is local government. We many times hear people ask what the coalition did for Guyanese. And I would like to mention many times you see we brought back local democracy, which
Mhm,
should not be taken for granted. I think,
mhm,
you look around and you see people now understand the importance of local government elections. And what you see the People's Progressive Party, in essence, is doing is saying to citizens across the different towns and Guyana, to eliminate and eradicate all local opposition by putting in councils strictly political parties that reflect the People's Progressive Party. Councils, in fact. I am no stranger to the municipality. I served for 2 years in the Linden municipality between the period 2009 2010 and was at the point of being nominated and elected as the regional council and placed as the regional democratic chairman. I give up that seat. So I'm no stranger to local government and local politics and local governance and the issue of how the municipality works. So having local government return from the era of 23 years of absence under the People's Progressive Party, it is now important for us to educate persons to appreciate how important local government is and
mhm,
how they can play a part, but more than that part, how they can identify leaders to get into those councils to represent them. And I think that is really what you see over the past several weeks in Linden.
mhm,
A, a strong desire to first educate people on that, but then educate them on the issues affecting them. And in doing that, we have found that it is very much affecting the People's Progressive Party,
mhm,
notwithstanding our challenge to get that message out on mass media, because the message is the truth. And when you put that message, for example, what have the PPP done for you? And people get a chance to really evaluate in 3 years of massive spending money in the treasury. It
mhm,
occurs in Linden, there is no tangible to show that. And we've been speaking that message and propagating it right across the community and people buying into it. So, in the absence of mass media, the PPP went back to their old tricks of NCN. which is to use NCN, the sole mass media voice in the community, to campaign their candidates while keeping and excluding the campaign policies, practice, and even candidates of the APN. And I think
Yeah.
it was important up on World Press Freedom Day to see
Mm-hmm.
that in a country that still tries to promote itself as a liberal democratic society, that the political opposition is not being allowed to use the state media, which is funded by taxpayers. And that is the critical point that the PPP is making. And that is the point that we had to show in reflection of what is actually happening.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. So I figure what you're really saying there is the tricks and the stuff that was happening, because we saw that you were, I believe you guys were campaigning, because we have been seeing you everywhere in Linden with other persons, of course, throughout the area, doing your campaign work. And like we've been seeing even outside of Linden, but throughout the country, there are elements, coming to see what type of confusion that they can cause. I do believe that's what probably led to that station call.
Yes, well, it is, among other things. The PvP campaign is not a very sophisticated campaign in
Mhm,
terms of how you see them conducting the business. It's a campaign built on intimidation. I mean, early in the campaign, we had that. We have, especially at every one of our meetings, someone will show up in a red t shirt or a red cap
mhm,
and try to disrupt our campaign. In fact, I remember one of our meetings we had in Amelia's ward. A gentleman came almost inches to me,
mhm,
and a day after filed a report that we had assaulted him at our meetings, and it
mhm.
went to the police station. I think when he found out that there is evidence against him
Yeah.
actually assaulting me, and in fact it is him who is uh, carrying my name in a slanderous manner that he can be taken to court for defamation, that he reversed that. And, it just goes to show how he was being misled to the point of preparing to intimidate our campaign with matters such as those. And
Mhm,
again, the simpleness of the campaign of the PvP is not to have their candidates go to communities to have to explain their policies, to have to defend their positions, but to
mhm,
sit them on the television station and have them speak down to people. So I
mhm,
think even our approach, even though it was forced by the PvP, and even what we would have done anyhow, is finding favor where we are able to personally interact with people,
people. Mhm,
personally engage with them, and to have them know that we identify with the issues and how we can bring representation to them. So it have given us an opportunity to put some extra organization behind some additional mobilization on how we get things done. In fact, we have broken our campaign down into a 4 segment campaign, and we are
mhm,
just to wrap up our second segment to move into mass mobilization in our third segment into communities in a very aggressive manner, taking our candidates and to have them identify with their constituents and to
mhm.
show issues that they will bring representation on their behalf. So we have a very aggressive campaign, notwithstanding the intimidatory and frustrating tactics of the People's Progressive Party,
Mhm.
especially as it relates to the ground movement.
Well, I'm happy to know that, because I mean, we've of course been seeing it in Linden, we've been seeing it across the country as well, where we're seeing the APNU basically going house to house, talking to persons. And I always say, and this is what I love about what you guys are doing. When it comes to local governance, the groundwork is the most important thing. And I know from what we're seeing coming from you, you feel the same way.
Well, certainly. I think, not only we are seeing that, the residents who are the
Mm-hmm,
principal in this entire process is what we believe must see that. And it is
mm-hmm,
affecting, again, we will look in contrast to those who are our opponents in the People's Progressive Party. We,
mm-hmm.
based on our activism, have brought the entire government to Linden last Saturday, a week ago.
Yeah.
to actually bring nothing to the people. You had the VP, you had the Minister of Agriculture, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Home Affairs, Minister of Public Works, the whole cabinet,
The whole
because
barrage.
of aggressive activism. And even when they left, you still have ministers who are coming back with their candidates. And the claim that they're making is Sharma Soloman is in this campaign. And where did they bring him back from? And it's local government. But I want you to hear that contradiction. We started this conversation by asking who Sharma Salomon is. I'm
Yeah,
a resident of Linden. I've
correct.
lived here my whole life. I went to Mackenzie High School. I went to Regma Primary, Mackenzie Primary. I worked in Linden. I've run several organizations in Linden. I still do that. So for a minister to come from all the way out of town and ask me, what am I doing in local government elections, in itself is a contradiction of their sincerity of what local government elections is about. But it
Yeah.
also speaks to their deficiency in
Mm-hmm.
candidates that they're identifying. That as a Linden, I would expect fellow Lindener as on the PPP to be able to stand and represent. Instead, here comes the entire cabinet to represent their misrepresentation and lies. Because when they come, you're seeing them coming to address the issues that we are aggressively on the ground talking about. Things
Mm-hmm.
such as school, things such as the fact that Jagdio is a liar in that he never created Amelia's War.
That's
This
why.
was in
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
his. We have
Mm-hmm.
put them in a position where they now have to address the thousand house, the thousand plot house lot that they just wasted money on at a location in Black Tor, the 7 Millies hideout, while
Yeah.
touting housing development with no
Mm-hmm.
proper planning policy or stakeholder involvement. Both sides
Mm-hmm.
said to them. So we had Edgel back up here 2 days ago to say, yes, we had to move the thing as if to say moving it is a plus rather than poor and miserable planning. So
Mm-hmm.
again, our campaign is aggressive enough that the government, in its contradiction of our presence in the campaign, is recognizing that they are the ones who have to come and address the issues in Linden. So if we go to
Mm-hmm.
the Linden to Mabura Road that they never wanted, that is
Yeah.
something they wanted out. And let me say this, the issues in Linden are national. So if
Yeah.
we speak of the Bamia School, I heard Jack Dio made this ridiculous claim that that has nothing to do with local government. But it's a
Wow.
dual situation because
Mm-hmm.
the fact is, 100 local children are expected to go to that school in
Correct.
August. It's not true.
Correct.
That is meant constituents of
Immediately
Amelia's
affects
Ward.
the local. It immediately affects the local setting.
Yes, I think he is making our point why it remains national. Because a
Mm-hmm.
project like that, over $300 million, reflects
Mm-hmm.
nationally the policy of the government
Yeah.
in distribution of massive contracts to friend, families, and cronies. In that
Mm-hmm.
the procurement position, commission or situation is weak. The tendering position is weak. The issues to
Mm-hmm.
get compliance for new companies coming into the system is weak. How do you get NIS? How do you get GRE? All of this was overlooked as a national issue that is now
Mm-hmm.
affecting locally people in Amelia's ward from getting a
Mm-hmm.
proper school. And I think it
Correct.
is those issues and several issues that we have raised, including the synthetic track. We
Mm-hmm.
asked the government to show us in Linden, after 3 years of trillions in spending, what
Mm-hmm.
transformational program can you identify? Point to it. If they only
Mm-hmm.
say that synthetic track, then they will, in essence, have to give credit to the coalition because the idea, and as we like to
Correct.
call in Linden, the ideation was the coalition ideation, which means they're not bringing no new ideation to the table. Transformational programs you can see in Linden, if you look back to Linden, Forbes, Samson, Borno, would be like the Linden to Suzdek Highway, where you can
Highway.
see
Mm-hmm.
generation how people's lives have changed. The
Yeah.
people cannot point to any single thing how they
Mm-hmm.
have transformed people's lives in for generation in this town. and they wanted to scamp away with the synthetic track, which means they will have to share glory for that track if it's completed, which by now it should have, because it is not their citation. So I think we have been able to check and back them up in our local government campaign, that it now requires the attention of the government itself to respond to the things that we're highlighting to people.
Well, the government has continuously shown that they cannot plan, they don't know what it means to consult, they don't do anything that will contribute to you having proper development in any community across the country, because we're seeing it in Linden, we're seeing it in Berbice with all these projects that are popping up, and then you have to retract or you got to get more money. We're seeing it everywhere. So I can definitely understand what you're talking about there. Now, we're just talking about all the work that you've been doing, what you've been telling the people, the fact that the PPP has to be running into your community to try to, talk about and justify or rebut everything that you would have said to the Lindeners. What is the feedback? Because, the PPP is trying to sell this image that for some reason Linden is walking away from the coalition. And of course, I'm saying this very ambiguously because I know different, but I want you to help the viewers who may be looking at some of the stuff that the PPP is posting and the comments they're making, and trying to say to the population that somehow Linden is stepping away from the coalition and going quote unquote red. What has been the feedback in Linden with these campaigns and all the back and forth that have been happening?
The PvP skill is in their ability to PR, and they're good at optics. I don't think we can forget the days of the Gaisupo truck busing and trucking people all across the country. Those features have not disappeared from the People's Progressive Party. Outside of those features, new elements, now that we are merging oil into an election, has been added in terms of the ability to manipulate, to extort people, where you find people who are working some of these 40,000 work, people who are working SIP work, all the CDCs that they've infiltrated and now give work to. Those people are many times force started. You have to come. I know nominations day we had voice notes of people who represents the prime minister who was saying, listen, forget about today, put on your jersey and come out, we will take care of this day. That sort of reflection is what you have. And so you have maybe three areas where the PPP is putting on such an optics, moving away from the old mundane busting in people, which they still do, which is the extorting of poor people, because they've created this culture we call the looking for it culture, where people looking for it, they feel that they gotta get it, and it's a very shameful thing how we have seen people reduce based on the lifestyle promoted by the People's Progressive Party. But then you have this group of people who get their contracts, who get these little small handouts and feel that that's what they have to do to maintain eating and drinking. And, they're the hustlers. And those are the people, we can see many of those people around the PPP. And I respect the ideologues. And I always say this, that those people who want to go with the PPP, we respect their rights. Unlike what we see the PPP is doing with the rights of people for political assembly, who are PNC associated in LETEM, for example, we will respect their rights to political association. But what you see in all of this optics, think, for example, in Linden, there is no single person or significant movement of people that the PVP can say, here are people that are moving who holds major constituency in our direction. It's people we know that are part of the People's Progressive Party anyhow, or they fall under those three categories that will wear their red jerseys, those who they exploit or extorted. So we are quite clear that even though outside. And you made the point earlier about the television station. Our voices are locked in. So outside, you look at social media, you see that we are not being able to voice that. But the PvP is well able to project themselves. So that perception, that facade, that misrepresentation of the fact is easy to project while demonstrating that they have large following. We have a good wave on nominations day. We had a
Mm-hmm.
good wave when the VP came to Linden. You listen to the end of the VP voice note. There is a very famous one circulating in Linden where he said, Agile, Agile, let them go. The people probably bored. We done with them. People just get up and go away when they recognize they're not speaking anything of substance, which they actually came with. Nothing of substance. In fact, 2 days after we checked them on nothing of substance, a flyer came out that
Mm-hmm.
just made a list of promises
Mm-hmm.
without substance. So promises such as the Wismar to Mackenzie Bridge, promises such as the Linden to Suze Dyke Highway expanded. And again, so little substance in the promises that these are not even contracts, they're MOUs.
Yeah.
So the coalition, in essence, who actually had a bridge with feasibility studies, funding, and everything set, taking out the budget now for a plan, a promise with no substance, and that
Mm-hmm.
is what they keep on Saturday.
Yeah. Well, I hope that people are getting the picture that what we're seeing happening not just in Linden but across the country is nothing but optics when it comes to the PPP and this attempt to stir up trouble. I saw, I think, in a video or it was a post. It was either this morning or yesterday where there is an issue with a building that was refurbished during the coalition time for senior citizens. Could you shed some light on that?
Well, you mentioned about poor planning and
Mm-hmm.
lack of stakeholder involvement. And
Mm-hmm.
micro in communities, you saw that with the People's Progressive Party and how they wanted to deal with the issue of COVID, for example. Without
Mm-hmm.
consulting people, without having people's involvement, they went ahead to hijack our only whole elderly facility in the community to put as
Mm-hmm.
a COVID center. But we know that was a longer play for somebody's personal interest, and the community came out and stopped it. Now, why I say it reflects the wider approach to the People's Progressive Party poor planning. It is
Mm-hmm.
because if they had sat down with the stakeholders, the RDC, the
Mm-hmm.
community of retreat, like if in the wider macro sense, in when COVID struck, they had sat down with town councils and other opposition forces and other elements in society. Not only we could have avoided those many of those deaths, but
Mm-hmm.
even as we plan for using such facilities as the Darfur Home and Retrieve, we could have known how to better prepare our communities to deal with the issue of COVID, including how do we house those people, how do we provide for them, instead of allowing many persons to die, and then you had their representatives on the ground who were
Mm-hmm.
prepared to perpetrate this act for them in their own communities. And that
Mm-hmm.
is what we find that many of these activists, many of these candidates, and we found even one who is a candidate that is the manager of NCN, that
Mm-hmm.
now we have to go to ask permission for state access, is going to say to us on a political platform if that could be allowed or not. So this is what we found most activists being used to do, which is to really
Yeah.
just give tax support to the PPP and to give resources of the communities to the PPP without understanding they're giving away the resources of the people of the community.
Mm-hmm. You know, you touched a bit on it earlier, but I would like you to zoom in on it before I get to. I know there were some other issues happening recently that I know you want to talk about as well. But the fact that the PPP is walking around, not just in not just in Linden, but they're walking around telling people, for instance, in Georgetown, we see these ridiculous videos being made by what I will say gullible young people who have no clue, in essence, what would have happened over the last 23, and now adding three more is 26 of the PPP, where we knew that the PPP turned what it was, a garden city, into a garbage city for 23 years. They did no work. They didn't allow their business people to pay taxes. They didn't give the subventions necessary as the Constitution permitted. But here they are telling persons that, come, give us a chance, give us an opportunity, like they didn't have 26 years to, make something happen because they were there. And here again in Linden, I was watching at some videos again of Jill and them, Hamilton, in Linden, and you're hearing the same rhetoric where they're telling persons after Linden would have experienced the hand and the full pressure of the PPP for 23 years, that they should give them a chance and an opportunity. And we hear this happening in all the areas that they perceive to be strongholds. I came on to some Lake Tony recently when the president visited Pleasance, walking around as I don't know why, because I asked the question, are you here to give back the community ground that Jagsio took from the village? What about all these pink slips that the villagers are holding where we did not get the COVID fund, but yet you're here asking to give us a chance? What do you tell people when they listen to this level of rhetoric coming from the PPP now?
I think many times people, it's like the emperor's new clothes, right? And I always say to people, these guys walk around as a sickness, as a disease of what is affecting them, and that is shame. And their remedy for shame is to treat it with shamelessness. That's the cure. They know in 3 years, and I don't even go, even though we could and should, to those years measure. I measure 3 for 3. I measure your 3 against the coalition, 3 years of spending, not 5 years of government, 3 years of spending. You have to spend. What you have available now, I challenge them. In the 3 years of spending, even with what the coalition did, and even in policies such as local government, in substance of things done, you show me in Linden. I always ask people, show me, point it to me, point where your lives have improved. And if not the community that you live in, you personally point to me and show me where. For example, we found 2 oil wells, 2. Don't let them say CGX SO alone or Exxon alone. CGX found 1 too. 2 oil wells we found. And if Guyanese, especially those in Linden, feel connected to it, that these guys are walking around putting their chest in the air and giving the impression as though people are not aware of this being the richest country through GDP coming off the IMF, and this also being the country with 50% of poverty and a large percent of people in abject poverty. People know that. People know that as much as they have all of that resources, that only 5% of what they are given goes to the working man and women. And 95% of almost 4 trillion is there to be spent on what we don't know, but is given to places such as Ministry of Public Works to execute massive works. Those same young men in Plaisance, for example, who got $400 million, should know that that is not anything that will enable them to become empowered. Very important. Hear what?
Let me
Because
just say the Plaisance,
most of them don't own the machinery and equipment that they will have to subcontract to get some of those works done. So they'll take that money, it will leave Plaisance, and they will just be empowering and enriching someone else. And that is really the economics of what we call the looking for it culture that the PPP continues to peddle nationally in Guyana.
let me just say the 400 million they're talking about is not just Plaisance. This stretches to a few other villages on the East Coast that are considered what people will say, coalition support villages, and their breakdown, some of those contracts, it's basically $2 million, right? And some of them are main roads, etc., which will also not necessarily be given to some of those persons, but persons outside. So that 400 encompasses so many areas. So it's not even, the way it is being put out there. I just thought I should say that it's not.
No, no. You see, all those clarifications are necessary,
Yes.
because this is a big optical illusion to say that they're empowering on the developed communities, and this is how they're doing it. And when you look behind that sort of process of empowerment, it is not only disempowerment, it is a position to keep you in that looking for it culture, which says you have to keep looking and accepting what is there. While we are saying it is right over there, we have trillions of dollars, we found 2 new wells, we are entitled to this in terms of our GDP at 65% growth. We have these sort of resources. Then don't look for it. Let us organize and go and get it, because it's right over there. And I think that is what they are continuing to do. So more than just thinking about the thin spread, like we signed Victory Valley a few months ago, it's really in educating those young men and women, which they are consciously aware of, but are desperately in a position that they need it. Consciously aware of, you will not get beyond. So I would say to them, we saw $2 billion given to brothers and sisters on the quarantine post. These are 12 contractors. And you get in among hundreds of hundreds of millions of dollars. And at the end of this, you came in at some of the lowest possible bidding. It means you're barely going to get it. I know this because I was in the system. You have to bid for these works. You have to pay people. So when you squeeze out where you're getting, you don't have equipment, you don't have machinery, you're going to rent somebody Hymac, you're going to rent somebody Bobcat, you're going to rent somebody bulldozer. When you left back with this, you're not going to see another work in months.
And I want to remind people, because it's a culture as well, that I must beg you or come and run at your feet to do things, rather than a government that should be distributing contracts in a fair manner across the board, because a lot of these contracts apply regularly through the procurement system, which should be functioning and working. But here again, when it comes to election, what we see the government continuously doing is getting themselves, what I will call, involved in corruption, so that people may come and beg at their feet for stuff. And instead of going through the procedure, because many of them tender the regular way and don't get through, but then you come here as if I am your fairy godfather. I call it, the villain and the hero syndrome. It's like a two-faced thing, because you're really the villain, because you're not doing what you're supposed to do for the person. You're the one that is causing the situation, basically. And then you want to run off and take off the villain mask and run in back from the back door and say, here I am, your savior. And this is what we see the PPP doing in all of our communities. And,
the whole country.
Yes, in all of our communities throughout the country. And, the thing is, what I see young people particularly, and persons who have contracts, it is the government obligation to ensure that persons who are entrepreneurs, businesses, also have contracts. I remember during the coalition, we saw the government putting in systems in place to ensure that a certain amount of government contracts be given to small business persons, to ensure that it wasn't just the big contractors getting. And that had to be implemented in every single ministry. So then you saw small businesses, doing small procurement, being able to benefit. And that is the purpose of a government. That is what they're supposed to do.
I think what you're going after is the issue of good governance, and that's the absence of the People's Progressive Party.
Definitely.
To oversight and to ensuring that people get value for money and things like that. And you go to those same contracts and how they're distributed, and you see the relevance of these distribution now when you have something like local government.
Correct.
And this is the phenomenon of oil in election. It's the first time we're going to see oil money in an election, sorry. And
Mm-hmm.
what you're actually seeing is with no good governance of oversight, of proper spending, of ensuring that accountability is there and transparency on how these monies are distributed. People
Mm-hmm.
can literally just go and give them away. And we saw that even when we had the flooding
Mm-hmm.
and the Minister of Legal Affairs, $1 billion
Yeah.
cash on the table. And then the Minister of Agriculture a few months said that they must admit that the issue of accountability, that they had to launch an investigation. What became of
Correct.
the investigation, we know the outcome. So
Mm-hmm.
again, this is a government that lives comfortable in the facade of no good governance. And you see many of the overseas reports speak of it, whether
Mm-hmm.
it's inequality and lack of access in terms of press freedom, falling behind, whether it is the issue of proper oversight to ensure that some of these subcommittees are going to work and work properly are absent. It took us so long. I think you saw ex-Minister Patterson speaking a couple of days about the procurement commission and how it is lack of even any substance to do work properly with all of these massive spending and contract. So this allows you to see where now politics and oil is
Mm-hmm.
allowed to be unaccounted, and
Yes.
these sort of small um, looking for it style contracts. So how we have broken down the looking for it culture. You know, they say to many people, oh, the coalition and do nothing for you. So these
Mm-hmm.
little things, it is easy to give out, and we made mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So I am one of the first to accept that in every government mistakes were made.
Mistakes are
But
made.
once you can kick down people's door with impunity and shoot them in their beds, you can
Mm-hmm.
go on Golden Grove and you can kill Mr. Bacchus as if he has no owner. You
Mm-hmm.
can kill Mr. Sampat, you can arrest young Tamika Clark as a liar, in essence, kidnapping her. Those are not no longer mistakes. This
Mm-hmm.
is an infringement of your fundamental rights that even moves to the right to life that you're seeing being taken for granted these days. And I believe it is in that context that many Guyanese will then start to recognize that
Mm-hmm.
without putting checks and balance, especially in areas such as local government,
Yeah.
especially in your municipality, where you can see property and distribution of resources at a more micro level, is what the PPP wants to absolutely and dominatingly control. And I
Mm-hmm.
believe that is why it's important for people to be part in the 12th of June process.
Yeah. You know, when we go out there, I tend to tell persons we have a culture where, because of what we experienced for 2 decades under the PPP, where there was no local government election, basically, then there was the return of democracy at every level, which included local. And we have two local government elections
In
under
three
the
years.
coalition
In 3 years.
in 3 years. And people, you saw the low turnout because people weren't sure what was happening, why do I need it, etc. And you see there is some bit of confusion still in terms of why it is important. And I tell people that even with what is happening, what we're seeing the PPP doing, and this crave for control in every single area so they can dominate and again continue to press on us, that this local government election is critical to this nation. What do you say?
Certainly, all politics are local. Everything starts from the foundation. This is why Jack Dio claim is so laughable that we could bring up the Linden Foundation School, as a nationalist, when children are going to directly be affected by it, as they are right now, where people have to send their children miles to Regmont with Tupa and other primary schools, when
Mm-hmm.
right in front of their home, a school should be opening for 800 plus pupils in about 2 months. So local government has significant impact and implication on how national government works. But I think the points you made earlier about the return of local democracy for people to exercise that fundamental right, and it's taken for granted. We should say thanks to the PPP for now putting impetus into this process of people understanding just how important it is that even the government, and this again is why it's laughable when you see Edgel and Linden and Jack Deere and Linden saying to me, Linden, oh, what am I doing in local government? When
It's
they're
a
not
fear
even
for
from
you
Linden
too.
and their government and saying to me locally about it, it shows just how desperate they are
Mhm,
to control these local democracy and avoid checks and balance, and that very fundamental, which is good governance. So local government for people around is going to show them not only what the PPP desires for their community, but at what cost they're prepared to go after it and what they're prepared to spend. So I'll give you an example. You saw for the Linden Town Week, community field in the Retrieve Mackenzie High School ball field. I went to Mackenzie High School since 92. That ground was never done. It was always swamp. And
mhm,
less than 3 months ago, the government was prepared to spend 25 million, which is left in a half done state, to do
mhm,
that ground for a black party, which
mhm.
shows that the priority of investment is not in people,
Correct.
it is in events that will enrich and empower people around them. Now, this is why local government is important because
Mhm,
it brings people attention to what are the important things that you would like to see develop
mhm.
and when and how do you want to see them develop. And that is important. Look, the picture is right up there. So, this is why people must know that in the return to local democracy of local government election, it empowers them to identify local leaders who can bring
Mhm,
proper and right representation on their behalf in this very wealthy country where
mhm.
resources should be given in an equitable and equal manner, unlike what we are seeing right now. And that is why they must get involved in it.
You know, I'm happy that you give that example that you did and, help to lighten and have persons understand the importance of what we're heading into. And as we press forward as well to general elections, I have, and I want you to stay because I want you to give we're running out of time, of course, very quickly. I'm basically almost at my end, but I want you to stay online as I show and I do an ad as well for a young lady by the name of Chevon who was recently in the Mocha situation where her business and home was destroyed. And it came to a point where we had videos, you saw the Hymac or whatever you call it, literally smashing the drink cases that she had in that building after they had demolished it and they were at she probably could have salvaged some of the goods. They literally just went and smashed on those cases as you're seeing in that video being played on the screen.
Mhm,
And this situation has left that young lady you're seeing on the video there. They're literally smashing the cases. They did not just destroy her home, her economic, business. They went further to make a serious point by doing what you're seeing there on screen. And it has left her in a state where, of course, people who have businesses, she has a small business. The bigger business, they would have seen these things, I'm sure.
not hearing. So I didn't get the last part of the question. I don't know if you can hear me, but I wasn't hearing you. Can you hear me? Okay, so the thing about, so if you can hear me, I still feel encouraged to comment on this particular matter, because you see this matter, we have history of this matter in Region 10. This matter in very similar fashion occurred in Region 10, in Linden. We had the heavy-handed behavior of the People's Progressive Party in moving people who went to live and live decently as Guyanese are expected to do. We had farmers in communities who had food growing on trees and crops that were bulldozed by this government. So what occurred in Moko, we had the opportunity to actually sympathize with residents. I went there, I saw in the rain, in the weather, in the elements, people were knocked down and just left to suffer. And then to hear the VP yesterday saying that his government, this PPP government, have never been harsh to remove people. The evidence is there. Chevron is there. The countless of people in Moko, the dozens of those in Amelia's ward are actual people who exist. And to hear him say, as if that never happened, in itself speaks of the nature of Barry Jackview and the PPP by extension. Because you have left people in this wide open country to be in the sleepless night without any recourse. And here is your justification. So I would encourage people not only on the barbecue, but in terms of solidarity of so many things that are affecting people in these communities, that we must come out and show our support and to ensure that we participate in what they're doing. So not only for Chevron, but for the entire Moko community, our thoughts and prayers with you, and we continue to encourage your support.
Thank you. I would also ask you at this time, is there anything you missed, any closing remarks you want to give as we close today's program off?
Oh, well, thanks again for having me on. And just to say that in Linden, we are running a very aggressive campaign in terms of our local government program. We know the game of the People's Progressive Party. We have managed to push it back. We've managed not only push it back, but to dominate and to ensure that we stay on top in getting our message out, in having our people properly aware and understanding of the issues, and to taking them directly to the poll come the 12th of June, and to encourage others, not only in Linden, but across Guyana, people within the People's National Congress, people within the coalition, people within the APNU, to hit the ground and to ensure that we do what is necessary to win these local government elections.
Thank you so much. It was a privilege having you here on the program with me. And, just a note, I don't think I've ever told you this, but you've always been one of the young politicians in my time that I've always looked up to with your level of activism. So thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you to our viewers for watching Facing the Nation. Do be sure to join us next week, same time, 12:30 to 1:30 on Channel 6 and all our social media platforms. Look out, follow all our pages, keep up to date with the information that is being shared so that you can know how we're doing, what we're doing, and how you can help us as well. Thank you once again for joining Facing the Nation. Do have a wonderful afternoon.
'Cause we ain't giving up no mountain. We ain't giving up no tree. We ain't giving up no river that belongs to we. Not one blue sake, not one rice bread, not one grass, not a bit of grass. We love the open country of the Rupununi and the Essequibo. Take time on it. Though we may criticize it, this is our home, we love it. And we need to keep it. We have that right. So we ain't giving up no more. We ain't giving up no. We ain't giving up.